Gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Grant Schofield from Auckland University Technology in Auckland, New Zealand. Grant and I started our academic careers together in a tropical Queensland in Australia. He is a lecturer in psychology, and myself as a lecturer in human movement science. And I think most of our career was developed over lunches at Susie's Asian Delights in the courtyard of Central Queensland University. I've worked with Grant for many years. He's a former elite triathlon competitor, having placed in the top 100 in the Hawaii Ironman triathlon. He's back doing triathlon again, so he's got a very elite focus to his sporting background, but he's moved from that elite focus to physical activity and public health. He currently runs the Center for Physical Activity and Nutrition at AUT, which is the center that he started and founded when he moved from CQU to AUT, and runs the largest research group of its type in New Zealand dealing with physical activity and health issues. Grant is an entertaining speaker. Now I have to tell you that because of course you'll struggle a little bit with his accent. There are a few words that you have to get used to, so if he says sex up here very often, he's really talking about the number that comes after 5 and before 7. He's not talking about the activity. But then again, I don't know. I haven't seen his talk. It's a great pleasure to have Grant here today. I think he will stimulate a lot of the discussion that we will have following this in the area of physical activity and health promotion, especially in the sedentary area. And I think you will find that he draws from a wide range of background to challenge some of our thoughts in the area of sedentary behavior and physical activity. Ladies and gentlemen.
Well, good morning and thank you for coming, and we're going to start talking today about your brain. So your brain defines you as a human. It's 1,200 cubic centimetres. That's a much bigger brain pound for pound than anything close to us in size. So for example, chimpanzees and gorillas, similar size, 300 to 400 cubic centimetres. And this big brain has driven almost everything about us as humans, because when you have a big brain, you have a big energy requirement. This brain is chewing through about 20% of your energy reserves right now, or hopefully. And to put that in context, a working gram of brain is chewing through about 16 times more energy than a working gram of muscle. It's highly energetic. It runs on carbohydrates, and we need plenty of fuel. So we saw this place that humans came from, which was this dried out Africa, that jungles disappeared. And when jungles disappeared, that was a massive leap forward for this new hominid, this big brain bipedal hominid, because we could somehow now get more calories, because these wide open savannas support these large furry herding animals. And if you can catch a large furry herding animal, as this fellow is here, then you've got a lot of calories and you've got them for a long time. So we think, and actually the University of Alberta was involved in a great video, you can stream that from I think the CBC, about persistence hunting, which is this notion that humans tracked animals in groups and didn't hit them with long-range weapons, but really ran them to death. And that running to death advantage is part of what defines us as humans. So we're in this unstable outdoor environment in more or less constant motion. Actually, let's just say that again. Unstable outdoor environment, more or less constant motion. That's the sort of environment that humans grew up in as a species. Can you think of anything that's the opposite of that? Yeah, your workplace now, most schools and most living rooms. But we haven't got much going for us as humans if you think about it in hunting animals. When we're slow sprinters, We've got short nails, fingernails, most of us, not very sharp teeth, no hard exoskeleton. We're pretty soft. But what we have going for us is this ability to sweat through a mostly hairless skin and carry water with us at the same time that we're moving. So this is a massive advantage when you're chasing large furry animals, because they neither carry water nor can sweat through this hairless skin. So in that context, we can run them over a day in a hot Africa into a state of heat exhaustion, and it's a matter of just knocking them off as they collapse on the ground. So that's the human condition: unstable outdoor environment, able to sweat, run long distances, and we're well suited for sporadic running over most of the day, which of course we don't do now. We'll be coming back to that today, but we'll also want to talk about the other thing that's fundamental, and it's hardwired into our brain about the human condition, because we don't hunt alone. In fact, as far as I can tell, I haven't tried it, it's very hard to catch a large furry animal on the African savanna by yourself. It requires, has anyone tried that? Yeah, there we go. We need this group of us, and we need to be held together, and it's hardwired into us. You see this particular characteristics that define us as humans, and I want to concentrate on just those bottom two. One is altruism, the ability to give to other members of your in-group, your species. And if you don't know, and there's some nice work from the University of British Columbia on this, giving away your stuff will make you happier than spending that on yourself. And there's very good evidence that when you give to others, biochemically and psychologically, you do better than spending that stuff on yourself. So that's, purely and utterly on being completely selfish. You should give your stuff away, which is a good strategy. Second, we have this empathy hardwired into us, these mirror neurons. So when someone smiles at you, you feel that pleasure. When someone in your in-group is in pain, you feel that pain as well. And these two things define us as humans in this context of this unstable outdoor environment. And altruism and an empathy. We can stick together, we can cooperate, we can share our food, we can share our energy, and we can survive this unstable outdoor environment, which food is only is not regularly available. And this really is a very important point when you start to think about how you're going to promote physical activity, because there needs to be a social context of giving and being part of a group, which I think is just critical. And you'll see that obviously things have changed for humans, and you'll see a bunch of these sort of drawings that we've gone from moving to being scrunched up in chairs and spending a good deal of our time seated. There's all sorts of different versions of this, that I particularly like that one. And this is my favourite, which I had to censor for this audience. But it's, basically go back, we screwed up everything, which is more or less true. And it's only recently, we only have to, these are the old order Amish in the US, and they give us a clue to probably how recently humans have moved a lot. So when you put pedometers on Amish people, you might get sort of between 17 and 19,000 steps a day. One fellow in this particular study clocked up 51,000 steps in his day as a subsistence farmer. I had a go at that, and I did it by running the Auckland Marathon. On the day I ran the Auckland Marathon, I vaguely warmed up. I ran the whole run, and I hobbled around in some form for the rest of the day to accumulate 37,000 steps. So you remember that these Amish have no concept of exercise as a purposeful, they're not going to the gym, they're not working out, they're not taking leisure time walks. All of the things that we promote, activity is built into their normal day. And I think that's worth considering when you're promoting physical activity, that exercise is a sort of post-World War II invention in most countries to allow for the fact that we actually needed to expend more energy as we invented our environment out of it. It's also worth thinking about what's going to happen in the future, and sometimes these sort of Pixar type movies are a good clue. Do you remember this movie, WALL-E? And well, it's 700 years in the future, and predictably humans had trashed the planet and had to leave. It's sort of feasible. But they'd also become motionless, and they were in their spaceships being carted around on large lounge chairs. And the result of that, of course, was that the ship's computer became unreliable, and humans had to think, but they'd forgotten how to think, because movement and thinking are connected. And once you start to delve down into the neuroscience of it, indeed they are. This large brain, this distributed neural network of 100 billion neurons, its neuroplasticity, which is its ability to change itself. Your brain will change itself. It needs to change itself. The hardware and the software are the same thing. So to learn something, to create something, you need to change it. And neuroplasticity depends on physical movement. And when you physically move, you see this cascade of brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor, vasoepithelial growth factor, insulin-like growth factor. You don't have to be a neuroscience to figure out that I've got those sorts of names. They're probably good for rewiring your brain and brain cell growth. And indeed they are. So in the end, the ship's captain ends up taking the first steps for humankind in 700 years and takes himself off the large lounge chair and is able to think again. And I want to come back to thinking and movement throughout this talk, because I think that as a positive message to our communities that we work with, movement with the brain in mind, as we start to gather more and more evidence, is something that we can take to the community. It's a great message. Movement and thinking are the same thing. This is a modern-day equivalent of WALL-E. It's actually the Whitsunday Islands in North Queensland. I went there on a conference, holiday. I think it was a conference. I don't recall doing any work there, but yeah, that's right, it was a conference. But this is a modern-day equivalent. It's a beautiful island with lovely tracks and wildlife and everything, which no one goes on. And there's a hotel section down one end with about an 800-metre radius, and the Australians basically drive themselves around in these large golf carts, and then the battery ran out with one person, and they're just stuck sitting there. You know, what do I do now? Get out and move. And this is modern Auckland. This is the North Shore of Auckland, near where I live, and we've sort of continued to build these suburbs, which, if you're familiar with the environmental literature on physical activity, really supports car use. It's these well-curved roads that support good car velocity and speed. It's a low-density neighbourhood. It's single land use. And really there's no local destinations. And you see this particular, you can zoom in on houses here. Here's one, I think in North America you call these McMansions, in the sense that they're unsustainable, but they also really support very little community interaction, kids playing around the neighbourhood, this sort of thing, and high car use. So this is actually, I was up in a helicopter, which was a great part of my job, to take these photographs on a Friday lunchtime. So I have no idea what these 6 cars are doing outside this place, but yeah, go figure. And this is, we continue. The interesting thing here is that these are planned suburbs. These have professional designers, urban designers, city planners going about their business to design these sorts of neighbourhoods as we speak. And this, of course, is a result, billions spent on freeway and road systems. And when you look at the sort of academic research on this, you start to see these neighbourhoods with very little social connection. So when you're using a car and your neighbourhood stops at the end of your garage, well, you don't have a community to live in. And there's a whole bunch of consequences for that. We'll come back to that, but what we will do now is just talk about sitting. These are motion sensor graphics from what's called an inclinometer. It just fits onto your thigh and measures the angle of your femur. You can tell whether you're sitting, lying, walking. And you see different occupations here, so even a stroke patient. And the yellow is sitting. And you can see that there's some occupations that, this is a vet working with animals, has some sitting but quite active during the day, through to a taxi driver whose trace basically resembles a stroke patient who's lying in a hospital bed the whole day. And it's worth thinking about these bottom two traces, because I often use this with these senior executives that I work with in workplaces. We measure their activity using the inclinometer. Put out the trace like this, and it's worth pointing out that their movement pattern is indistinguishable from someone who's been lying in a bed, a hospital bed, the whole day. And as we've started to understand this behaviour of sitting and long-term sitting, and there's a whole science that most of you hopefully will be aware of, that sedentary behaviour, long-term sitting, is an independent risk factor from being active. So you can be an active couch potato, and there's a risk associated with long-term sitting, particularly unbroken sitting, which is why we've been encouraging you to stand up and applaud today, that this activation of these large muscle groups, even at sporadic and low levels, has good health benefits. And then you'll see these messages. I picked this up the other day about how sitting's killing you. Personally, I think that's the wrong way of talking about health and promoting health, and that we can do better with a more positive message, especially when we talk about the brain and mind. My all-time favourite for, you probably find this quite funny, hopefully you will, but I think it's a poor message, is this American cigarette promotion for teenagers. Hey Siggy, don't you know you shouldn't be hanging out with me? Oh shucks, why not? I still think you're cool. Bang. Because tobacco will kill you, the rest of the word which we won't say. Which is all very funny, but actually that sort of messaging really doesn't drive behaviour change. It's negative, it fits with the sitting is killing you, and I think we can just do better. We can do better, and I think we can take some lessons recently from psychology. Psychology hasn't always done things well. In fact, psychology spent the best part of 100 years concentrating on sickness and mental illness, despite the fact that we called our services mental health services. And I think someone who's changed that recently has been Martin Seligman from Pennsylvania, with this new positive psychology stuff. This is an excellent book, Flourish, if you haven't read it, but it's a nice way of thinking about how to redefine how we think about human mental health into a more positive approach. Studying the sorts of things that give you a fulfilled and flourishing life rather than those that leave you languishing is a slightly different twist on the science, but a massive difference on the way that we make public health messages public. And I think in public health, my area, health promotion, all of our area, that we can do well to take some lessons from positive psychology. And I'll be coming back to those throughout the rest of today. Just to show you, I think Denmark, when they do these happy country indices, Denmark recently came out on top, but a country which has been purported for many years to be the happiest country in the world. You may not have heard of it. It's called Vanuatu. It's in the South Pacific near New Zealand, and I've been lucky enough to go there and do some work for the World Health Organization. I just thought I'd throw in the slides because it's particularly good in Canada, where it's not quite so tropical, to show you that this is possible. There we are. It's all good. It's research work. But the point here is, when you go out to these outer islands in Vanuatu, you see this community subsistence living is still going. There's no electricity, there's no power. There's some basic medicine, but people are by and large very healthy. There's virtually no evidence of chronic disease, because if you want anything to drink, it's water. And if you want some protein, you can catch some fish. And if you want anything else to eat, you can get fruits and vegetables if you grow them yourself. But beyond that, there's a loose morality that develops to keep these village structures in place. And it relies on empathy, it relies on altruism, and it relies on social connection. And when you combine those three, empathy, altruism, social connection, with subsistence living and human movement, you get a fully functioning society. And it's quite an eye-opener when you can go out to these places and understand how much happier a life they can have than what we see in many of our societies, with virtually no resources. Back to the workplace. So really, I've chosen two settings where we've done most of our work. The first is the workplace. And I've felt we've been doing this commercially as well as in our research work for the last decade, really, promoting health through workplaces. It's a good setting. It gets adults. Adults are parents. You get hard-to-reach populations. I really like it as a setting, and I particularly like it when I can convince companies to invest in their human capital as a realistic business proposition to get good return on investment, retain their staff, and develop a healthy staff culture. And we've been doing this in this particular company, Vitality Works, for, as I say, a decade, and it's been also supporting our research activities. And we've either developed or stolen programs. This one's, I've called it the official 10,000 Steps program. This was originally, we did it in Australia, but I think Kerry Mummery actually originally got it from Minnesota. But we branded ourselves as the official. Anyone can call themselves official, as it turns out. Just sounds good. And you know, a weight loss program, again, in the workplace, positive messages. There's a group fitness program called Next Step. Challenge Me, a team challenge around physical activity and nutrition. Again, Neuroscience of peak performance. These are the sorts of programs we've been running for the last decade with some good success. And what I particularly like of this is you can do this work free of public health funding and use business funding. And if you do your analysis and evaluations as a health promoter well, you can show returns and reduced absenteeism, a concept I like called presenteeism. Presenteeism is, you may not be familiar with it in this country, but in our country, it's people turning up to work and not actually doing any work. I'm sure that doesn't happen here. But we can get good returns on getting people more productive and engaged in their work through these sorts of programs. But actually, it's not enough. It's not enough because the environments in workplaces still support sitting. And you can go for this sort of situation. You can just put your chair on top of your desk and away you go. But probably that's not good enough. We need to reconceptualize how we design and work. And I've had an opportunity recently to start to do that. This is just a view down the corridor of my research centre. There's apparently some sort of health and safety issue leaving bicycles inside. Yeah, but we've started with this idea that we'd actually just get people, if sitting on your butt's a problem, well, we'll just stand up. So we started to redesign our desks, and we were able to commission someone to build these little things that fit on top of your desk for really $100. So it's a pretty cheap intervention. And that's all worked pretty well. We've had these different flavours. Karen on the left there is with a height adjustable desk. Those are slightly more expensive. But yeah, we've really got the whole research centre to be spending large amounts of their days standing. It adds a bit more energy to the office. It burns slightly more energy. Not that much more, surprisingly, but it adds up over the years. So you might be burning an extra 2 kilos of fat, all things being equal over a year of extra standing, which doesn't sound like much, but in the context of other things, it's probably worthwhile. But recently, actually, we've that old research centre you've looked at is we're moving to a new building. Our government's investing in a $50 million, that's about 3 million Canadian, I think. No, not really. But to this new institute, it's also a sports institute. It's a high-performance sport, which isn't me, but it's my research centre. We're moving here, and I don't know what your workplaces are like, but we live in a bureaucracy. So they said, look, we've costed out the fit out for a new office for the furniture. It's $600,000. At which point I've gone, you on drugs or something? What's going on? Because I could build 2 houses for that, and you're telling me it's costing that much for 30 desks and a few chairs, which we don't want to sit on anyway. And they're like, yeah, 600,000. We've costed it out. So at that point I said, look, we'll just build our own furniture, leave us alone, and give us half the money. Which they agreed to, surprisingly enough, which flabbergasted me. But so we ended up well, and at the same time, and this is always dangerous, you've just read another book. So I'd been reading the Steve. Has anyone read the Steve Jobs book? You know, I quite enjoyed it. I mean, he is an asshole, and let's just get that out there. But he's dead, which is a shame. But he grows on you throughout this book, and he had an ability. Well, first of all, slightly unrelated. One of the things he would do is have walking meetings. CEO of Disney or whoever, whichever bigwig wanted to meet with Steve, you would go on a long walk, and it could be a 2-hour walk in the mountains. But that's how he would do business, because he felt that people would be thinking. He probably wore them out as well, but that's another story. But he had this design thinking that just building something functional wasn't good enough. It had to be cool. And had a wonderful line, and you may not like the language he used, but Steve's one-liner for stuff that wasn't cool but still worked was, it's a piece of shit built by shitheads. And you might not like that language, but you'll never look at a Toshiba laptop the same. It's true, or a Hewlett-Packard or a Compaq, because they do. The design is not there, and they're just trying to catch up now. But you know, really, Apple did a wonderful job of designing cool stuff, and there's this whole design thinking process come out of that sort of work. And this is a modern office, and actually, it's just broken, isn't it? It's broken, and it doesn't work properly. And when you get down to it and look at the actual furniture, you could see that Steve was right. It was built by those people with funny stuff on their head. It's just wrong. And how we've got to a point where we think that's an adequate place for humans to spend most of their time when they're awake is completely and utterly beyond me. I mean, it doesn't even, it's fake wood. It's not even real wood. It's not. So we started into the, and this is the other thing, that the best, this is a cool looking chair, but how is it normal to think that something that supports you sitting in it for long periods of time is a cool thing? So an ergonomic chair, in principle, is ridiculous. And I'd been quite keen on bear crates, to be honest, as something you could sit on. Although I must say that I got onto, this is Canadian Office Depot's site, and I got onto the site just before I came to Canada, and these are the 8 workstations available on the Canadian Office Depot site, 3 of which are height adjustable and encourage standing. So actually, compared to anywhere else around the world, and I had a look at several other large office companies around the world, you guys are doing well. But they're still pretty uncool. They're sort of uncool in the way that's uncool and that's uncool. You just wouldn't want those ones. So how do you redesign? Well, that's cool. That's not a bad seat. I mean, it's going to force you to get up. I mean, you wouldn't want to drink that stuff, but it's probably not quite good enough, is it? We need to redesign this office, the whole environment. And so I ended up doing some collaboration, which I thought was unusual for me. For me, collaboration has been working with other people who do very similar things to me. They promote physical activity, they might have some expertise in statistics that I don't have, but it's all very close. This, because I had volunteered to build office furniture, and I can't build anything, I can hardly hold a power tool, was scary to me. So I went and visited a school of product design at our university, and they build stuff. They've got workshops, power tools, it's good fun. And they also run this process called design thinking. And it's a really cool process. And it's a very different way of thinking about how you might develop something. And I think if you don't take anything else from this talk today, then you might think about this process as a way to get creative about designing your health promotion projects. So design thinking isn't anything exciting, but it's a way of separating space and time that you have time to be creative. You have to pencil out 2 days in your diary. You have to go somewhere, and you start a structured process for trying to think outside the square. So creativity isn't something that just comes to some people who have the gift for creativity. Everyone has it, but if you're in that mode of ticking stuff off, rushing around, doing things as fast as you can, which, let's face it, we all get into, you have virtually no chance of being creative and designing your programs. So we got into this. I just wanted them to build some height adjustable desks because we needed to spend this $300,000 that I'd managed to wangle off these guys who had no idea how much they were spending, and I'd have $200,000 profit and would be, travelling off to Vanuatu again and having lots of fun. Take the whole team there. But they got me into this process, and you go in and you start to think about needs. You start to, this is my team, brainstorm the needs. You start to do some more structured work, more structured work, more structured work, and you come up with a bunch of design principles. We went and looked at people in offices. We talked to people in offices. We sat there and just watched offices and saw how people worked in these workspaces. And these are the principles that we came up with. Transformation. Offices that we studied had single space use, and if you could reuse the space, that'd be great. This is an acronym. It stands for Get Off Your Ass. And we felt that was important, and that we had that going in. So we didn't necessarily discover that, but we felt sitting and a lack of movement discouraged energy. We also felt that we needed an anti-ergonomic principle, something that made you sit for a long time was a bad piece of office furniture, and you should burn it. Energy, no-brainer. Avoid silence. When we saw offices, we felt that the sorts of offices that we really didn't like, when you could hear someone typing because it was so quiet, was just a bad place to work. So some noise was good. We felt rest was good, particularly sleeping. And I don't know what it's like in Canada, but in my country, it's socially unacceptable to go to sleep under your desk during the day. Is that true here? Yeah, okay. But really, the evidence is quite good on this, that extra rest, time out, even a short nap, has a lot of neurological and psychological and physical benefits, especially in problem solving. We felt that collaboration was important, that spaces that could bring people together, but equally, the ability to be by yourself and single task without interruption was also important. And there's really good data on this that, I don't know what it's like in Canada, but where I come from, most of the women in my life tell me that A, I can't multitask, and B, when I'm even do single task things, I'm not very good at it. Does that happen here, guys? Yeah. Well, it's true for physical multitasking. And ladies, we don't care. We just don't care about that. But it's for cognitive multitasking, all of us are bad. And when you try to cognitive multitask, you probably have about a 50% deterioration in speed and a 50% deterioration in performance. So you're faster, you're slower, and you make more mistakes. Mistakes are things you don't know you've made. And there's really good data on that. So turn your cell phone off, unplug your phone, go and do something by yourself if you actually want to get something done. And that's really an interesting idea that science knows that, but business does the opposite. And my last thing here was honesty, which has nothing to do with human honesty, it's to do with honesty of materials. So we felt that when we talked to people and they talked about their furniture and their office space, if it looked like wood, people really wanted actual wood, not Meltika with grains on it, because that's dishonest furniture. So go back to your office, and if you're looking at it and you've got a dishonest piece of furniture, tell it off for being naughty and dishonest. But we tried to build furniture that was actually made out of real material. So you go into this second day of this design space and you start to do this sort of work. You start to actually build stuff, prototype out of cardboard initially, build office spaces. That's me attempting to do something, and away you go. And you eventually then start to get your power tools out and build prototypes. So this is a hot, you can see bits of this are polystyrene, and it's not actually functional, but it's the first. It's a small desk, but it's movable. You can stack 4 or 5 of these together and have a larger table. It's potentially height adjustable. You can end up with, it's Kate, one of my research officers, showing the height of it. This is a slightly larger one, which is dual purpose. It's a bigger desk. We felt that we needed some bigger spaces. And again, it's height adjustable. It's the only thing I got some of the students to send this over, and I noticed that this thing was on there, which is this little, sort of looks like a voodoo type thing, and I was concerned, but actually it turns out in the School of Product Design they're designing solar powered incubators for African countries where there's, premature babies are born, but they can't power the incubator, and that's a a baby-sized thing rather than a voodoo doll. And here's a seat that we've designed. It's a stackable chair. It can also act as a shelf. It can act as a smaller sitting box. You can sit on it like that. You can sit on top like that. It's all very good. So that's the sort of work we've been doing recently. I think we've spent a decade in workplaces doing programs with a positive message, and I felt that's been productive. But I think to sum up our workplace work, where we've decided to go now is to collaborate with people who actually build stuff. And I think when you're promoting health, you think you can't do that. It all sounds too hard, but actually you can do that, and it's quite good fun. And that's the fun we've been having. The office is getting built right now. My furniture's in production, and the next stage, of course, is to evaluate the success of this. It could all be a complete failure, I admit that. And I go back to the university having wasted $300,000, which will be a bit embarrassing, but I don't think so. Having the staff and the people involved who are actually going to use it has been a massive step forward, as has this design thinking process. Okay, we'll switch to children now, and I think really this is our national sport. It's rugby. It's reasonably popular here, I know, but nothing compared to hockey in Canada, which seems to be everywhere. In fact, it's the first T-shirt I saw when I got off the plane in Vancouver. Hockey, Canada's game. But this is rugby, and one of my sons is on it's the smaller one there. But these are three boys of the same age with very different body shapes, and we've heard a lot about childhood obesity and how that affects health. And I think possibly our concentration on obesity at the expense of physical activity has been a problem. I'd like to talk just about activity and particular types of activity. We've been measuring, these are pedometer steps. This is some of our research. This is pedometer steps in primary school age children. This is the school year group, so the little 5 and 6 year olds at the bottom, and more of the 9 and 10 year olds at the right. And the black is weekend steps, and the open circles are weekday steps. And I think after putting motion sensors on thousands of children in my country over the last decade, the one standout finding is this, and it's sort of what you wouldn't expect as an ex-child, is that when kids have the most opportunity to move on the weekends, they're 30% less active on average. And you start to reflect on your childhood. I mean, we are all ex-children, aren't we? And we start to go, how is that possible? And then you start to think about it some more, and as children get older and more independent, they're also becoming less active. So our least active group are our older, most independent children on weekends. And that strikes me as something that's unusual and consistent around the world, actually, and consistent in this country too. And when you start to pull apart children's activity by time of the day, it starts to give you some clues about where and what could be done. So the top panel there is weekend or non-school day activities, and it's in quartiles. So you see the amount of moderate and vigorous activity, including in the top quartile, is across the whole of the weekend day. And the least active quarter of kids barely get off the couch the whole day. But it's a different story, and you don't see such big differences on weekdays. Kids accumulate a lot of activity in school days, and they do it in some fairly discrete periods. And they're all fairly similar. When they have access to unstructured play on their own terms, recess and lunchtime, most kids accumulate a lot of activity. And you can see that there. And then it separates after school again. Some kids retire home to the couch, and some kids keep moving around. And I don't think it's sport. Sport's great. Sport gets kids moving, organises them into teams, teaches them about social rules and structures and outcomes. In a politically correct world, that's sometimes good. But I think we've forgotten about kids playing. We've forgotten about unstructured play, risk and adventure on their own terms. These are my kids. This is Takapuna Beach on Auckland's North Shore, which is just a few hundred metres from our house. This is them playing and lighting a fire. I mean, frankly, you would think the police had better things to do on a Saturday night, but that's another story. I just ran away at that point. They explained it to the policeman and they put the fire out eventually. But we've sort of lost, I think, the ability to let our kids go and do this because it's dangerous, which the policeman explained to them. And someone could get burnt, which the policeman explained to them. But actually, it's just good, fun, kid stuff as far as I'm concerned, yet it's now illegal. And these are English. This is just a little case study that was in an English newspaper. It's 4 generations of 8-year-olds, starting early last century in a town called Sheffield, and looking at what we in the field call independent mobility. But if you're not in the field of physical activity and health, you might just call it free-range children. The ability for children, because the opposite's true, aren't they? They're confined, battery children. That you can see that this grandfather back in 1919 ranged throughout virtually the whole city unaccompanied by adults, and that shrunk across successive generations so that the modern day 8-year-old barely moves at all, can go to the end of the street unaccompanied. And that seems to me to be a shame. I actually plotted out my 8-year-old activities. This is, again, Auckland's North Shore where I live. And this was I had a BMX bike, and for some unknown reason, my mother and father allowed me to go and start a beer can collection at aged 8. So I used to ride around the neighbourhood. I lived in the centre there. You can see the little dot. And down to this direction was a rubbish dump. Up to this direction was a golf course, and people used to drink quite a lot of beer golfing in those days. And there was quite a run-down neighbourhood on the other side there, so I'd cycle around looking for beer cans. And that's really sort of a 6-kilometre radius. I still live in this area, and I'm very liberal with my 2 oldest boys are 9 and 11. I'm very liberal about where I let them range by themselves, and you can see how that's just reduced over the years. And I would be one of the most liberal parents for free-range children that I know of. In fact, people criticise me for putting them in danger, which I don't think I'm doing. In fact, I think I'm doing the opposite. And I'll explain why I think I'm doing the opposite. This is a Canadian thing. Do you remember this? This was my first ever cassette tape that I bought when I was a kid. It was a Canadian band called the Men Without Hats. And what was their song? It was a safety dance, which is exactly the little dance that parents have started doing now. The safety dance around the safety of their children and not allowing them to free range around the neighbourhood. So when we start, and we've done quite a lot of this work, start to ask parents and children why they don't let their children free range or have any independent mobility around the neighbourhood, it's around safety. The parents are very concerned about their safety, particularly from strangers, which is, there's really not much evidence that that's going to happen, and also from traffic. And there is some evidence that, because of course that's part of the problem, if everyone's chauffeuring their child from activity to activity, there's of course more traffic. That's understandable. When you talk to the children, the 9, 10, 11-year-olds, they understand that their parents see those as barriers, but they don't see those as barriers. They think they're quite capable of negotiating the neighbourhood, and I think for the most part they are. So the great, and they miss out on this because under parental supervision, kids tend not to get into actual real rough and tumble play. So, and take risk and adventure on their own terms. And I think there's some good evidence now that it affects brain development, particularly the frontal cortex, the frontal lobes, by not engaging in this sort of activity. When you deprive humans and animals actually of rough and tumble play and risk and adventure on their own terms, then neural development is impaired. And the great irony of not exposing children to risk is that in the long term, they are less able to handle risk. So let's just have a look at the neuroscience of that. Here's a brain, sort of funny colours. I had to draw these things in myself. So just think about the context here, you've got this sort of 3 layers of human brains, this brain stem and cerebellum, very basic features, all animals have those. Then a mid-layer, that orange part is part of the mid-layer. This part's part of the limbic system. It's called the amygdala. It's the stress response. It's intact when you're born. It's a highly effective fight or flight response. It has this negativity bias. It's set to go off like a hair trigger. It's worked very well in the past for humans because it's saved our lives from dangerous, life-threatening situations. When it's tipped off, you'll become pessimistic, you'll overgeneralize, you'll reduce your working memory so you can focus on single things, and you'll become emotional. You might get angry if you're staying and scared if you're running. And those are fair enough, those are good things. And it's intact when you're born. Not only that, if your pregnant mother is extra stressed, it will grow even bigger. Get ready for the stressed world. We have this capacity to control that stress, though, in humans. It's through this yellow part called the prefrontal cortex. It's not developed when you're born, and it develops through childhood. So this prefrontal cortex, it manages your emotion, turns off the stress response by running simulations about the future. It manages risk, controls emotion by understanding consequences of behaviour. Now, there's some evidence that it used to be fully developed in children by mid-teenage years, and in the last 50 years, something about the way we're bringing up our children means that it's not fully developing until our mid-20s. So this part of the brain that controls our emotion, manages risk, isn't developing as fast, and we really think that has something to do with this lack of exposure to these unstable outdoor environments, risk and adventure on your own terms. Now, I'm not advocating for absent parenting here, but I am advocating for the idea that there's an appropriate time for children to learn risk and the consequences of that risk. And that might be up a tree when you're 8. It's probably not when you're behind the wheel of a Subaru when you're 18 and the police are chasing you. Equally, there's probably no real harm in getting to a bit of a wrestling fist fight with your next door neighbour when you're 7. He punches you, that hurts. You punch him, you figure out that you'll have no friends if you punch someone. That's a good time to learn that. It's inappropriate when you're 27 in a bar. You can cause more damage, you'll be arrested. And equally, there's also the social complexities of parent-free play. That people don't come along and say, oh, well, that Grant Schofield, we know he's bad news and just stay away from him. So people might need how to figure out to get on with me on their own terms. And that's probably a good thing. So risk and adventure on our own terms. What do you do about that? How do you get this free-range childhood back again? Well, the first thing you can do, and this is an intervention we've used quite a lot, is work with TV time. Personally, I just suggest unplugging it and telling your kids it's broken. That takes them a while. It took my kids 6 months to figure that out. That first and foremost, I think when you start to understand that kids' preference is not screen time, it's playing. And that if you just turn this thing off or set strong rules around that, that can be highly effective at reducing children's sedentary behaviour and encouraging outside play. I particularly like this. This is an American invention. It's called TV Be Gone. It's for $10 and it turns off any TV from a distance of 25 metres or less. And you could I've even used it as a neighbourhood intervention. I just walk down the street pushing it. No one's come out. I don't know what's going on inside, but it's worth thinking about. But we had been thinking about redefining kids' play, and one thing I had liked is Lego. And it turns out, you may not know this, that Canada is the first country to put a Lego man into space. People know that? Yeah, there you go. Famous for that. But we like Lego as a kid's play tool, but at some point it becomes a small indoor activity with no human scale. So we really wanted to go through this design thinking process again and reinvent kids' play, but on an outside scale. And I've had my kids wandering around with saws and nails and wood. And the thing that we had noticed more than anything else is that they had trouble cutting stuff with saws. And when they nailed stuff together, first of all, they used up all the nails and never put the hammer away. And sometimes they just nailed the wood to the wrong things, like the side of the house, and that wasn't really acceptable. So we wanted to build an outdoor scale Lego and have that as a commercial product. And that's still in development, but people haven't liked my name, but I'd come up with this thing called the zombie box, which was a box full of, brings play alive, which was my tagline, which apparently is very uncool. And so we'd had this idea of this zombie box, and it was basically bits of 2x4 and marine plywood and things with holes drilled in it, ropes attached, and nuts and bolts. And really you could build anything from a tree house to a rope ladder to a trolley to a little house outside, and you'd have the ability to do that. So we designed it all up. It doesn't actually look like that. We haven't made the box. But I would, and that's my kids trying to do that, but actually at the moment, in the beta stage, it's been a complete failure because all that's happened is I have wood spread across the whole back deck. Someone did attempt to make a trolley, but it's been down the side of the house for about a month now. And so we do need to go back to the drawing board on that, but I still think there's a place for an outdoor scale kids Lego, which I have been quite excited about, but in the beta stage, I would say it's been a failure, at least at my house. We have had another trial which I've really liked called Play, and in the Play study we've been in what we call primary schools, which are age 5 to 11-year-olds, and we've been trying to redefine how we manage recess, lunchtime and after school and weekend activity in these schools. So what often happens is these schools close down after school. They shut the gate and no one can go back in, even though they're a great community facility. And that's even more so on the weekends. And they have rules in place that really manage risk. They manage risk at the expense of negating benefit. And so we wanted to really work with school principals and school boards and parents to try and redefine what was going to be acceptable for kids playing. And we're a year into a trial now where we've had money. We won money to initially build school playgrounds, and my idea was like, cool, we'll build a big adventure playground and kids can play on that. Until we figured out, actual fact, that wasn't the problem. And these large playgrounds were by and large boring and attracted kids to do boring stuff. So we wanted to redefine things. This is one school. We ended up building, this is a Maori, which is our indigenous people creature called a taniwha, which is some sort of dragon. So we built this climbing wall. It doesn't exceed health and safety standards because it's less than 1.2 metres high. And it's just a great climbing wall. There we go. Built by local materials. Kids help build it. It's all good. And it's amazing what kids can help build, even at this age, when you get them into it. More than anything else though, once we started building stuff, we also figured out that really in schools, the main thing that was holding back kids' activity, especially risky activity on their own terms, was the social structure. So in this school, we reintroduced tree climbing, which you might think most people would object to, but in fact we had no objections from any parents and the school principal in total support. They're great trees for climbing, I think you'll agree. Of course, New Zealand doesn't freeze over for most of the year, so we can go out there and do that, which is great, more trees. And I think really that's the thing that's gained most traction in all of our intervention schools, is redefining what's possible in a schoolyard, especially in tree climbing. And I think tree climbing is an excellent activity for kids. Some kids will fall out, and some kids will break their arms. And that's not that good if you break your arm, but it's much preferable to me than kids getting chased by the cops when they're 18 in Subarus. It's hard to draw that evidence together, but this has worked really well. Here's an example of what we've done in this particular school playground. They had to take down all of their existing play equipment because they thought they were in breach of health and safety regulations, which they probably were because the thing was actually rotten and had nails sticking out and stuff. Which, again, you don't have unsafe stuff for the sake of it. If there's a risk with no benefit, you don't do that sort of play. If there's a risk of this much with this much benefit, you'd definitely do that. And that's what we've talked this school into. So we've rebuilt This is a sort of climbing frame. You can fall off it. One kid actually did break their arm, which was unfortunate on the first day. And we had expected some sort of issue with that, but there really wasn't, and that's been fine. It's healed now, and they're on their way again. More stuff in there, but this is my favourite actually. It's called a Chandler Truant, that's its actual name. And it's a round piece of equipment, and it's on very smooth ball bearings, so it spins at high speed. And the kids will spin it up, and you jump on it, and if it gets enough speed, you'll fall off the side, or you'll throw up, whichever comes first. I haven't actually seen anyone throw up just yet, but it's been a really redefining what's possible in schools has been a great way to redefine home activity as well. And we've got some evidence now that this extra activity in school is transferring to extra activity out of school, and that's just been a lot of fun and a really new way to think about promoting activity, that it's activity with the brain in mind, because if you don't experience risk and adventure on your own terms as a child, then there's issues later. There's more of the Chandler Truant, more of it. This has nothing to do with me actually, but I really liked it, and I saw it the day before I left Auckland. This is AUT Square, which is in the central part of Auckland, and this is a theatre company doing some school holiday activities, but basically they've got a few thousand empty boxes there, and you just go in, and as a kid you just build stuff, and it's really cool. There's more. It's a kiwi, it's our native bird, and this is the theatre company. It's called We Built This City. And it's just a great little activity, and I took my kids to it and had fun. So, play, I guess, stepping back from my zombie box idea, is actually relatively easy, and cardboard boxes are good enough. So we'll just finish now. I just wanted to finish with this little video. Let's see if this will actually work. This is this exact cardboard box activity. This is in Sydney. You'll see the Opera House in the background and the Harbour Bridge. This gives you a nice little feel for the use of cardboard boxes as kids play tool. This is my favourite. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for your attention. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and we look forward to the discussion.